Lauren's calling me. Guess it's time to call Lauren. Yeah, I can hear you. One second, my chat can't, so I'll see if I can fix that so chat can hear you. Just give me a moment. Yep, I'm in Ukraine. I've been here for about, I would say 4 months. I was in Poland for about a month and a half before that.
Well, that's definitely interesting. That definitely adds a real aspect. I respect people who go and observe the things they talk about politically on the ground. You know, it's not common, certainly in the Twitch sphere or YouTube sphere these days.
I think it's important for people to get directly involved with the things they talk about. I think there's like a certain amount of knowledge that comes with that direct involvement. And I think it also shows to people that it's like more than just like necessarily like lip service, which I think a lot of people will do, but they're not willing to put like, you know, where their mouth is. I think I deeply believe in that.
Well, there's definitely a thing to it as well, where I feel like people can say some crazy shit when they have no personal investment in the politics that they're talking about, because they know that they just see the numbers going up. They're not seeing the people's lives that are affected by the issues they're talking about. They're not having to experience it with them, see the consequences. It's just numbers go up, 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 instead of, actually face the reality of what you're talking about. But speaking of, let's talk about that reality. I just posted on Twitter the other day that I was pretty disgusted with the reaction people were having, particularly progressives and a lot of individuals on Twitter claiming they were ecstatic, celebrating the death of Alexander Dugin's daughter, Darya Dugin, who obviously is a pro-Russia commentator, political pundit, all these different things. And I saw you. What did you retweet my tweet with? I can't remember exactly. So if you could.
I don't remember exactly what I said. I could read it quick if I just pulled it up.
Yeah.
1 second. It was basically just like my general condemnation of her. I was very much, I have this thing where if somebody really, really bad dies, a lot of times people will whitewash exactly how bad they were. This is something that, like, for example, if Henry Kissinger died tomorrow, I would see a lot of people come out and try to pretend he wasn't involved in some of the worst atrocities that took place during the 20th century. And what I try to do when people die, generally, is make sure that I give an honest retelling of what I thought about their impact on the world. That doesn't necessarily come with me like dancing on their grave, but I think it needs to come with some honesty, because I think that once people pass away, people like forget exactly what those people did during their lifetime. Let me see exactly what I tweeted, because
well, that's what I was going to ask. You're not for the political assassination of Darya Dugin, right? Like,
no, I don't. I don't think
that should have happened.
No, I don't think she was influential enough on the propaganda sphere or like the justification of war crimes for it to make sense.
Okay, what about her father?
If she was like the propaganda minister of Russia, then like maybe it would be a little bit different. But she was an independent journalist. And so while I have no sympathy for her, and I have no sympathy for Alexander, because I know about their beliefs, I know about what they've said when it comes to the dehumanization of Ukrainians, when it comes to the justification of war crimes and advocating for war crimes, saying Ukraine doesn't have a right for exist, pushing for this war for the last 20 plus years, ever since Dugin wrote The Foundations for Geopolitics. I have no sympathy. But I don't think that this assassination really accomplished anything. There's like some schadenfreude out of somebody who advocates for such brutal acts against the Ukrainian population, then having that same chaos happen to them. It's almost like if somebody said, "Oh, I hope this person gets beat up," and then they get beat up. There's kind of like almost like a cosmic karma. But I don't think it accomplished anything significant.
Okay, but it does sound like you are kind of defending to an extent the schadenfreude people are getting, which is what I was calling out. This idea that, you know, you have all these accounts going, this is karma, bitch, right? Yeah, go ahead.
You tweeted, "A whole lot of cowards celebrating the murder of Alexander Dugin's daughter tonight on Twitter. Pathetic, showing your true colors, the lot of you." And I responded, "She used her position to advocate for war crimes against Ukrainians like the murder of POWs." This is in reference to when she said the defenders of Azovstal should be put on spikes in front of the Ukrainian civilian population.
When did she say that?
She said this in an interview. It was actually the last interview she did. It was a right-wing Russian YouTuber. She went on her show. It was the last interview before she died, actually.
Do you speak Russian?
I do not speak Russian. No, I speak a
So
little
how do you know
Ukrainian
she said to how do you know she said to put Azovstal defenders on spikes?
because it was translated, and I also sent it to multiple people to make sure that the translation was accurate.
Well, your friends suck because I also found that same clip going viral on Twitter, and it was translated by a few fucking retards in the
Okay.
progressive sphere on Twitter who don't actually speak Russian and decided to put spikes there. She said nothing about spikes at all. In fact, what she said was she referred to a art performance in which people had their hands bound and were judged by the townspeople. And she said they should bind their hands, like this art performance, if they are partaking in crimes, and that the local population should decide what should be done with them, whether that be some sort of tribunal for crimes, investigation, whatever it is. That's what she said in the clip. She said nothing about spikes. And I sent this to not only an expert in the Russian language, but an expert in Eurasianism and the ideology.
Are you positive about this?
Absolutely.
Okay, I can double check this afterwards. I'll take your
I
word
can
on
send
it
you
for
the
the
translation.
conversation. I'll take your word on it, because I had it translated too, and they said that she was advocating for this.
Yeah,
But okay,
people
I'll
have been
take your
saying
word
a
on
lot
it.
of things. People have been saying a lot of things. I'm sure you've seen the clip where, like, do you think that Darya and her father have advocated for genocide of the Ukrainian people?
Advocated for genocide of the Ukrainian people. I don't think she's directly said we should genocide the Ukrainian people. I do think she's done some of the steps that would be necessary, or she's advocated, or at least publicly helped in what some of the steps would be necessary for it to happen. There was a New Lines report that was released in May of, yeah, it was in May, where they talked about the multiple, the conclusion of this report was basically that Ukraine is at risk of a genocide taking place because of the type of rhetoric that's been used by the Russian state, the type of actions the Russian state has done. And part of the things that they've talked about that could lead to a genocide taking place is the dehumanization of Ukrainians and the denial of war crimes. And she has denied war crimes, and she has dehumanized Ukrainians.
What has been her dehumanizing statements? And I'm like completely open to hearing any sort of quotes. The problem is I'm
She,
seeing a lot of people put these quotes up,
mhm,
and all I want is an honest judgment, right? If people want to
mhm.
celebrate someone's death, I'm not for it. I don't think we should ever take joy or celebration in death or killing. Sometimes it's necessary. I'm sure you being on the ground in Ukraine and with many of the soldiers seeing them, you know damn well sometimes it's necessary, but that doesn't mean that we should take joy in the idea of slaughtering other humans. That's my position on the issue.
She
But
specifically, she was specifically calling the combatants during the war subhumans. She said this on Russian state television.
so okay, I also have the direct translation of this one. There was
Did she
let
use
me
the word
remember
subhuman in that?
So you said the combatants, right?
Yeah, she was talking about Azovstal defenders. I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. So let me get you the translation of that.
Okay.
She was asked her position on the Azovstal fighters. What should we do with them, Azov people? He gives some options. Oh, right. Okay. So, do you know who she called subhumans? Sorry, this is a different clip. I've got like a list of all the different clips that have been going viral of her.
Okay. Who'd she call subhuman?
So she was asked on this show. This is where she used the word subhuman. She was asked on this show her ideas on Azovstal, steelworks in Mariupol, which Ukraine held and Russia took. The fighters were Azov, which Russia sees as Nazis. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Mhm.
She says earlier in the interview, which is of course cut out from many of the clips that are being shared on Twitter right now, that according to the poet Novalis, death is a loss of sobernost. Have you heard the word sobernost while you've been in Ukraine?
I have not heard the word Sopanaz while I've been in Ukraine now.
I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, to be fair, but it's like a spiritual unity in the country. And she feels like there's been a spiritual unity lost in the country. She talks about some of the issues with discrimination, how the Russian Orthodox Church is officially banned in this area of Ukraine. She feels that war crimes have been committed against people here. And then she talks about how certain people have a terrible ideology of death. I'm sure you've seen that quote as well.
Yes.
And when she's talking about the Ukrainian national ideology of death, from her perspective, I'm not saying these are any of my opinions. I'm just talking about what she was saying in this interview. She's talking about individuals like Dmytro Donsov. Have you heard of Dmytro Donsov?
No, enlighten me.
So he was a Ukrainian nationalist, fascist, with a few others in this area that kind of came about in the 1920s. They were big fans inspired by Mussolini and the Italian fascist movement. And they had the ideology that anyone who opposed Ukrainian nationalism should be killed. Dmitry Donsov said that Russians were subhumans that could not be They could not be free. They needed to be ruled under an iron fist. Donsov also believed that only ethnic majorities within Ukraine should be allowed to vote and essentially have rights. Okay. And so when Darya was talking about there are certain subhumans with this ideology, funny enough, she is actually responding to an ideology which called Russians subhuman. So she said people who hold this ideology, who hold the ideology of Dmitry Donsov, who view Russians as not having a right to vote, who should be killed for opposing the movement, etc., they're subhuman and they need to be put on trial for their crimes. Which, funny enough, you know,
I disagree with that.
Wait, sorry, I just want to finish this thought, and I'll let you go for as long as you want. But I found it ironic seeing the translation of that clip within context and seeing all of the people on Twitter saying Darya Dugina deserves to die because she called Ukrainians subhuman, when what Darya was saying in the clip was people with the ideology that Russians are subhuman and deserve to die should be put on trial. By their own logic, she should have been more extreme.
The problem I have with this is that Russian state media, including Darya Dugina, has basically labeled anybody who supports the current Ukrainian government, that means Ukrainian government ministers, Vladimir Zelensky, Ukrainians who support the current establishment of like Ukraine and separation from Russia or supports Vladimir Zelensky's party, they're Banderites. They're of this ideology of fascism, of Nazism. They're the Nazi Banderites. And so when I see her come up and say that these people are subhuman, the problem is this is an accusation, almost like an accusation in the mirror, because you've labeled all of these people Nazis. And this is something I would assume you would actually have some sympathy for from your position, Lauren, is that when you label all these people Nazis, and then you say, because they're Nazis, we can do, or they are subhuman, or they are this, or we could do this to them, then what you're doing is you're going to then justify the actions you do later, whether it be bombings, whether it be killings, executions, or labeling them subhumans, which then that message is pumped into the head of the Russian soldier who they have in their mind. So when they're firing at the enemy, or if they say catch a government minister or find somebody who supports the government, they're going to think of them, this is that Banderite that person on state TV was talking about. That is that Nazi that they were telling us about, these Ukrainian Banderite Nazis. And that's where the dehumanization comes in, because the entire government of Ukraine has been labeled as a Nazi government.
Right. And this is why I find this to be such an interesting conversation to have about how do we treat and how do we react to the assassination of our ideological opponents, and how do we allow the public to talk about them, and how much should we hold them to honest portrayals rather than just allow them to kind of take off with these false portrayals of people like Dugina while celebrating her death. Like, I saw someone in your comments section to this live stream that you shared on Twitter with multiple likes on it saying, I don't give a shit what happened to Dugina. She was a Nazi. F her. She deserved to die, right? And that's exactly the thing you're talking out against right now. She's had this portrayal from a ton of progressives on Twitter saying she was a fascist, she was a Nazi, misquoting her, and then justifying a car bomb being used against her to assassinate a non-combatant. And then when we're talking about this, you're bringing up how the same thing is being done to Ukrainians. And I'm sitting here saying, yes,
but
exactly.
She's the one.
No. I'm saying it's a vicious cycle, and everyone's got a damn plank in their eye here. But the people who are mad about, like, Dugina's dead. We can't hold her to account for, we can't have a conversation with her about how maybe there's some hypocrisy here, this and that. But we can hold all the people on Twitter that are doing the same thing that they believe caused the death of Ukrainians. We can call them out for doing that, right? When they sit there and they say she deserved to die because she was a fascist and she was a Nazi, and they misquote her, they don't even understand the language. They're criticizing her for speaking and the words she's saying. They're just going off of, Twitter propaganda. Well, that's exactly what you're criticizing here, which is when all these people in Russia will say all Ukrainians are Nazis and we need to do this anti-Nazi mission and start bombing them. It's a vicious cycle of everyone pointing and screaming Nazi at each other.
That she had a position of power while she was on state TV. She had a position of power where she had millions of people looking at her and critiquing her words, including soldiers who go out and conduct violence within Ukraine. And when she, assisted by state media, calls all of these people Nazis and then proceeds to call them subhumans, has then dehumanized many Ukrainians who will then be at the victim of Russian violence. This is at the same time as she has been an advocate for this invasion for the entirety of the war and before the war, as well as her father, but that's a separate person. We can't hold her to the sins of the father. So for me, when she is in this position of power, dehumanizing Ukrainians advocating for the violence to happen and then denying the war crimes that take place, she is helping a system of slaughter and destruction and death that has killed thousands of people within the country. Like, she denied what happened at Bucha, which is absolutely disgusting. And so if you are somebody that knows of Bucha or knows people who suffered at Bucha, if you're somebody who knows of somebody that's been executed by Russian soldiers or have been killed by Russian soldiers, right? Because of this ideology that has been pumped into them by state media, which she has assisted in, it's not going to be that surprising when those people have zero sympathy for her or might end up dancing on her grave. The same way many people danced on the grave of propagandists who perpetuated the slaughter of people, let's say the Kurds in Iraq, or, of course, like more classical examples from
Dylan, you're saying exactly what she was saying from the other side. I think you're missing the point. I'm
but
not
the problem is, the difference is,
I'm saying it's a vicious cycle of people doing the exact same thing to each other.
She's actively helping the system. She is actively assisting in the slaughter of people.
But so are you by saying it's. So are you by saying it is understandable that people are dancing on her grave, because that's what she's done and that's what her father have done. They have said,
she didn't
look at the Odessa massacre
on
where a bunch.
Grave.
Wait, no.
She advocated for more graves to be created.
Yeah, no, she said the people who believe in this ideology of death, who follow the Italian fascism model, who think that Russians should be killed, who think they shouldn't have rights, they are subhuman. And then you're saying that pushes towards the narrative of people wanting to kill Ukrainians. Mm-hmm. So then Ukrainians look at Darya and they say, she called us subhuman. She's a Nazi, so therefore she's subhuman and she deserves to die in a terrorist attack. And do you see like the back and forth cycle here, right? If you believe that
Darya, what you're saying with the cycle of violence, if you believe the people that are dancing on Darya's grave are okay and it's understandable, then how is it not understandable for Darya to feel she can do the same and for Dugin to feel like she could do the same? One of the other viral clips that was going around. This isn't like Ukraine didn't invade Russia. Ukraine didn't walk into Russian territory. She advocated for this war to happen. She then denied the war crimes that took place, and she then dehumanized the civilian population, which the war crimes were happening to. This isn't a war where Ukrainians have invaded Russia and they're calling for the Russian civilians to be slaughtered in any of this, because that's not even a possibility. It is the Russian state that holds the majority of the power here. And so for a Ukrainian to watch TV as she helps this system of violence, it's not going to be surprising that they stand up and say, yeah, fuck you, I don't care that you died. Now, you could say, oh, that's a system, that's a cycle of violence because that violence begets violence. But the Ukrainians would say this is defensive violence against the state which is murdering us.
That's what the Russians believe, Dylan. That's what they believe too.
But the difference is the Ukrainians are right. That's the difference.
That's fine.
Because they're the one being invaded. Russia isn't the nation being invaded.
Yeah, but I'm talking about before the invasion. I'm against the invasion. Don't get me wrong. Just because I'm looking at things objectively and I'm trying to understand the Russian perspective does not mean that I'm for the invasion of Ukraine. I'm not.
Good to hear.
Have you seen the clip of Alexander Dugin saying "kill, kill, kill" the Ukrainians?
I've read the quote. I haven't seen the clip.
Okay, so that's a clip that's gone viral on Twitter, right? People saying this is Dugin calling for the genocide of Ukrainians. Now, in actuality, that clip was 8 years old, and it was right after the Odessa clashes during the
2014.
Yeah, 2014, during the protests on May 2nd, where Russian civilians, pro-Russians, were all locked inside a building and burned alive by Ukrainian activists. Mm-hmm. And now, in response to that, Dugin came out and said he's Ukrainian, he loves the Ukrainian people, but he feels the Ukrainian blood within him can only be cleansed through the avenging of the Russian people who were killed. He wants to see the killing of the motherfuckers, his words, that murdered these Russian civilians, right? He wants the only way to get justice for such a horrific act is to kill these people.
Can I be honest? I don't think he loves Ukraine. That's
fine. You can have that opinion. You can have that opinion. But when you talk about how, okay, it's understandable how people would celebrate and cheer the death of Darya Dugin because they feel, she has promoted the death of their people in some way. Uh-huh. That's the cycle. That's the cycle of what Dugin and Darya feel as well. They feel that there have been crimes committed against the Russian people, et cetera, et cetera. And you can...
Well, I mean, the thing is, you could say in most societies where there's a war, right? Anytime there's a war, one side is going to say we're the victim and the other side is also going to say we're the victim, right? During the invasion of Afghanistan, America says they're the victim because of 9/11. The Afghans are going to say we're the victim because we got invaded. Or you could look at any war in history, including wars where one side is very clearly not the victim, like the Germans during the Second World War. They thought they were a victim of a Polish attack when it was really just German soldiers dressed in Polish uniforms. Just like how the Russians dressed up in Ukrainian uniforms and attacked Russia from within Ukrainian occupied territory as a false flag to start this war. Like you could say that everybody can have a perspective to make them the victim in any war. That doesn't necessarily mean they're the victim. My argument would be that Ukraine is the victim of this war. They're the one that was invaded. And there's perspectives, Russian perspectives, that could make Russia the victim of the war, whether it could be NATO expansion, whatever they're going to say. My statement to them is, I don't think that's the case. I disagree. And you don't think the war was a good idea either. So I would assume you would agree with that as well.
But yeah, but this really isn't okay, to me, maybe I should lay the groundwork better. This really isn't a discussion of whether the war is justified or not, because we both agree that we don't think the invasion should have happened. This is about the state of how humans get to this point. And when you start justifying and celebrating the assassination of non-combatants, I think you start becoming exactly what you are claiming to hate.
Can I put a distinction? Can I put like two distinctions here? And the first distinction would be that some people would say that there's a difference between somebody who's just like a random civilian walking on the street and somebody who is assisting in a system of slaughter, right? Because there's a difference between a random Russian just walking around and a Russian on state TV denying war crimes and calling people subhuman, right? There's a distinct difference here because one is assisting in a war effort. Propaganda is a deep part of the war. Now, let me just be clear. I don't endorse the assassination of Darya Dugina. But I need to say that for my second distinction here, which is you can absolutely get that Schadenfreude from the people who are assisting in the slaughter of you. You can get that Schadenfreude and you can use this moment as a moment of release of kind of like, fuck you. Definitely if that person...
But if you're basing it on lies, then this is the exact same way that Russians...
I will agree with you that if it's based on lies, that's not the case. Right? But I've told you that there was...
You just started this way.
She denied war crimes. She denied what happened as Bucha. And when you deny war crimes, that covers up what a government does and allows them to go out and continue that behavior. She said that Bucha, the reason that it was fake was because the word Bucha sound like butcher.
Dylan, you started this conversation by using a fake quote of Darya, saying she wanted to put people on spikes.
I'll check the quote after.
Please do.
Whether let's
if you're getting Schadenfreude, you can't let that Schadenfreude blind you from truth.
I'll just say for the sake of the conversation, let's say that I was wrong, right? That doesn't change the rest of the things that she has done, whether it's been the denial of these war crimes.
I have to look into that because so far, most of the quotes I've been saying, that didn't happen, but continue.
She did call
She did not. She called followers of Dmitry Donsov.
But the thing is, if I say these Banderite fascists are all fucking scum, and you're talking about the Ukrainian government, you're talking about supporters of the Ukrainian government, which is the majority of Ukrainians, and then you say those people are the subhumans, then you're just, I mean, this is the distinction without a difference.
My point is that
if I said you were a fascist,
she's made a comment like that, yes, as
and then I said all fascists should be killed. What did I just say, Lauren?
Yeah, that I should be killed, right?
Yes. So that's what she did.
And I'd have to go and watch the specific clip, but I don't think that's what she's saying. You said you watched the clip. That's
you quoted it back to me. You read the full clip. You watched it.
She said, actually, no, she never said they should be killed. What the fuck?
No, I said subhuman. She said they should have... But I was making the comparison that if I called you a fascist, Lauren,
she said there should be a tribunal. She said there should be killed. She said there should be a tribunal to investigate the crimes of these non-people. Talking about the fighters, talking about the fighters who followed Dmitry Donsov.
She called them subhuman, Lauren.
Sure.
Does
that mean she deserves to fucking die?
I didn't say that means she deserves to
die.
Why
are you even,
but I'm saying that if you see somebody call your people subhuman and then cover up the war crimes against you, you should not expect their sympathy or for them to hold back in mocking them. These people have lost everything. They've completely lost everything. And she assisted in them losing everything. If they want to shitpost on Twitter about it, I think that's their right.
You understand what happens when people start shitposting about murdering people, right? You understand what happens when they do so on the premise of false arguments. When people say she called the entire Ukrainian population subhuman, she did not.
She called the majority of them subhuman. When people say she advocated for genocide, but then she calls them all fascists. Like,
when people say she advocated for genocide when she did not, which you are seeing mainstream media individuals tweet.
Wait,
how is that not?
You're putting me in an indefensible position when you say people have done this, people have done that. I could say people have done this on your side, or people have done that on your side, right? But I'm not saying, wait, Lauren, I'm not defending every single person who has ever posted about Darya, right? If somebody said, like, hey, let's take out Darya, let's take out all the Russian civilians, blah, blah, obviously I'm going to disagree with that. But I'm saying if somebody wants to joke a little about it or mock it, after seeing what she said about their people, after she advocates for this war of destruction, then covers up the atrocities that they face on a daily basis, I think that's perfectly morally permissible. Or if it is morally wrong, it's so minuscule, it's to a point I don't care. And that's different from me saying I endorse people lying. I don't endorse lies, of course not.
It's just, it's so cyclical, because the reason that she justifies calling Azovstal fighters subhuman is because she feels the exact same way you do, right? Do you not understand that?
Yeah, but she's wrong. That's the difference.
Called Russians subhuman
because
Dmitry Dontsov has said we can kill them, that they shouldn't have a right to vote. They've got a fucking statue of Bandera.
But the problem is, like, she believes that every Ukrainian who supports the Zelensky government, they're Banderites. They're of the same style of fascism. They're Banderites. They're Banderite Nazis. This is the Russian state talking point line. This is her talking point line. This is Dugin's talking point line.
Schadenfreude and saying she deserves to die because she's a Nazi.
I said
are partaking in the exact same horrible behavior.
That is not the same horrible behavior.
Yes, it is.
No, wait, no. Taking joy out of somebody who dehumanizes you and helps with the slaughter of your people is not the same as doing that exact same thing. Advocating for war crimes against the Russian population, I am solidly against. Calling Russians subhuman, I am solidly against. Covering up any war crimes that the Ukrainian government or military does, I am solidly against. She wasn't.
If I am solidly against all of those things as well, I have to look into this allegation that she was covering up war crimes. I have to, because so far, once again, every quote that I've seen on Twitter has been either false or so misrepresented that it no longer means what the original quote meant at all. So I have to look into that. But I really do feel like you are missing my point here, which is that the same reasoning the people on Twitter are using for celebrating Darya's death is the exact same reasoning that Darya or her father would use to say things like these fighters are subhuman or these fighters deserve to be killed.
So you're saying that the rhetoric is similar?
It's similar. It's the same.
Let me be clear.
It's coming from the same
Anybody who calls
reasoning.
Russian subhuman in response to this, or even her subhuman, I think that's wrong. And I think that anybody who would cover up war crimes is wrong, any of that. But there is a difference between those actions, which she engaged in, and looking at somebody who engaged in those actions and being like, I don't care that she died. There's a big difference between that.
Let me ask you something. Let's say Hassan Piker was killed in a car bomb tomorrow by Patriot Front or something, right?
Okay.
If I started jumping up and down on Twitter saying, I have no sympathy for this fuck, I'm laughing at him, I'm mocking him, right? How would you feel about that?
I'd probably say it was bad.
Yeah, but don't you think I should have a right to, you know, have a bit of schadenfreude and laugh at Hassan being killed, since he said America deserves 9/11 and he's one of the top streamers on Twitch, and therefore his high-level propaganda that he's partaking in was potentially contributing to what in the future could be more deaths of Americans?
I will say that if somebody is unironically endorsing 9/11 or thinking that is a good thing, then I would 100% not care. As far as I know, he walked back on that. She never walked back on anything she ever said.
I don't really believe that, because I don't think anyone that's quoting her in any regard actually even understands what she's saying, speaks Russian, or is watching all of her videos. I know that because almost every single damn quote on the website is incorrect.
Why you can't just say, oh, there's so many people who have lied about her, therefore it's all lies. Like, you can't do that. Like, she did bad things.
I'm certainly not going to take your word for it when you started this debate by misquoting her, right? So I don't know. Maybe she has walked that back. Either way, I don't even know if
you can't just send every piece of evidence I provide now, because I'm taking your word on that. I'm taking your word that she was misquoted, by the way. You can't just now, every time I say, here's a bad thing she did, she said, well, I guess, I'll just have to look at that after. Like, okay, I guess so. We'll just have to revisit in a month.
Okay. don't think there's any sort of bad thing she said that was just words and not direct combatant violence against people that can justify people celebrating and wanting more assassinations like hers.
Well, wait, let me be clear. I already said I don't endorse the assassination of Darya Dugina, right? So I don't have to, I'm not going to defend a position I don't hold, right?
You are defending the people
I
that
will
are
defend,
on Twitter
wait, let me be clear. I'll defend people engaging in mockery, not people engaging in let's go bomb all these people. That's very different, right? That's very, very different.
Okay, then
there's a difference between a meme and a call for terrorism. Will you agree with that?
Yeah, of course I agree with that. I'm fine with people posting memes about political things, but I've just spent the last week dealing with, I'm not joking. Like, I know a lot of people, when they talk about death threats on Twitter, they talk about like one or two, maybe even ones they sent to themselves, right? I've gotten thousands of death threats all week from people saying I deserve to die, not just because or not just Darya Dugina deserves to die because of all this, but I deserve to die because I dare say, hey, don't celebrate her death. All week. People saying they want me to die of rape, people saying they want me to be shot, they want me to be killed in a car bomb the same way all week. And these are the people that are pretending to be, the compassionate lovers of freedom. We just want people to not be killed in a war. Russians are evil. It's like, to me, all I'm seeing is a reflection of the same hatred they claim to be opposing. And you're not seeing that, and I'm not accusing you of being a part of this, but when I see you say things...
So how do you know I haven't seen it?
Oh, maybe you have. But when I see you say things like, people can get some joy from it. Yeah. I'm not really seeing a whole lot of the joy. I'm just seeing a repetition of more and more hatred and call for slaughter.
Well, I would say this is a social media platform. And so this is also going to be the lowest common denominator no matter what, right? But if I remember when I went to Bucha, right? And I talked to these people who like their whole apartment block just burnt to the ground, right? Due to the Russian artillery. Or I talked to one of the religious women who worked out of the local church where the mass grave is. And she talks to me about her parishioners getting tortured by Russian soldiers, or how many of her former church members are just gone or buried behind her church now. The idea of her smiling, hearing about Darya after she denied what happened there, I don't think that's too much to say, oh, that's out of line. I don't think that's too much to say out of line, because I think we're human beings, and I think that there is a form of, in their mind, like, cosmic justice that she assisted in covering up what happened here. Then she kind of reaped what she sowed. Not that she endorses it, but when you reap violence, when you sow violence, you might reap it.
I'm really gonna have to look into that Darya Bucha massacre thing. I'm gonna have to look into it myself.
The thing is, I can tell you right now, and this is maybe you don't believe me, but if she on state television said Bucha actually was a Russian war crime, she would have never been on Russian state television again. She would have been completely exiled from public society, because that is the official government position. That is the official state media position. If she was to actually say what happened to Bucha for real on state media or any platform, that would have actually been an incredibly brave thing of her to do. She isn't even she wouldn't though. She continued that system. Like you can doubt me on that, but I mean that's like a mainstream thing to do in Russian state media.
The only reason I'm doubting you on that is because I have seen a whole lot of fake news on this, and I don't know. I could just take it at good faith. And when you say like someone's smiling because she died despite denying it, I think that's a lot different. I don't think I could take that away from someone who experienced that firsthand that's actually in Ukraine, right? But when I see the Twitter psychos that are, I don't know, living in mom and dad's basement in Idaho or something, saying, rest in piss, I hope this girl, gets raped in hell for the rest of her life. That's not like a joy or schadenfreude that could even remotely be compared to that of this girl you're describing in Bucha, right?
I do think it's different. I think it's a lot more crude, but I think that the same principle applies. It's just more crude. That's all. It's less.
It's not the same. It's not the same principle either.
Well, it depends. I mean, if like the difference is she personally experienced, well, these people might not have. Well, a lot of the people are Ukrainian, but let's exclude those from the conversations. You can still have a Schadenfreude for just somebody generally denying war crimes, having something done for them. You wouldn't even need to be in Ukraine to still hold the same principle that if you're helping with the slaughter, that you might get some enjoyment out of it, some Schadenfreude, which is, I think it's hard for a lot of people to admit. This is like part of our human nature. The idea that when we see very bad people have bad things happen to them, we sometimes smile. But this type of emotions are going to be even like 10 times more heightened in a scenario where the worst atrocities known to man are being conducted in here. Like when we see this footage of like Ukrainian soldiers getting castrated, right? And we know that these people doing these war crimes have been pumped full of propaganda. The propaganda possibly spouted by her in part.
Well, here's the problem is like, how do we define bad people, right? When I talk about that guy cheering in his basement saying rest in piss to her on Twitter, the problem I have isn't that, you know, there's this person that's getting a little smile from the fact that someone who's a genuinely evil person died. The problem I have is that I don't even think he knows who she is. I don't think he knows anything about her. And you know how I know this is because my picture was posted all over social media, even by mainstream media,
Yeah,
as being
say that you
Dugan's
were
daughter.
his daughter.
Right. And I've been getting messages all week of people saying to me, are you dead, Lauren? Are you alive? And I've had to watch thousands of people dance on my grave when I'm not even dead. And you have people that are so passionate.
Doesn't that happen to Vosh a lot on this with the Kharkiv thing too?
Right. But you have all these people that are like, man, I'm so glad she's dead. This bitch, this, that, and the other, right? I hope she, you know, rots in hell. And it's not even her. So imagine wishing death on someone so intensely and not even knowing anything about them to the point you can't even identify who it is. The reason they're, sorry, just let me finish this. The reason they're doing this is because it's popular to say, because it's team sports, and because they don't actually know what they are celebrating. They don't actually know why this person deserved to die. These same people, and this is what I've been trying to explain this entire rant, if Russia were winning the propaganda war publicly and were able to win the Western mainstream media in saying we are running a anti-Nazi operation, we are wiping Nazis out of the area that are just inspired by Italian fascists, all this, if Russia were winning that propaganda war, not a single one of these people cheering on Darya Dugin's death would scrape below the surface to find out what was actually happening. Every single one of these fuckers would have a Russia flag in their bio and be cheering on the killing, assassination, and whatnot of any sort of Ukrainian nationalists going on and saying it was a Nazi killing operation. And they'd be spitting at me for saying, hey, do we really think that this invasion was, you know, justified? All the same, because the reason is their Schadenfreude, they're dancing on someone's grave, isn't really Schadenfreude. It isn't any of that. They're doing it all for social clout. They know nothing about this girl. They know nothing about why she deserves to die. They're making up quotes. They're doing it out of such ignorance, and that is the sort of ignorance that causes wars. That is the sort of ignorance that causes both Russians to hate Ukrainians and Ukrainians to hate Russians, and that's why I hate to see it.
So the first thing I would say is I just want to be clear. I am, you're not dead, so I don't wish you to be in hell or anything like that. I wish only her to be in hell. So let me just be clear about that. The second thing is, this
Why?
is just like a...
Well, no, you're wishing someone go to hell? Why?
Because I think she's a terrible human being.
I don't wish anyone.
I
don't care how bad they are. I genuinely don't. Maybe I have in the past, but I've changed my mind on that. I wish
nobody,
I wish for everyone,
like zero people,
everyone, even the worst human being.
I mean, I know this is like kind of like you know, of course, but like Pol Pot, like Stalin, Hitler, like all these people, heaven for all of them.
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Well, I disagree with you on that. But like I think that's pretty obvious why we just. I mean, okay. But the thing.
I highly recommend reading C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. It's they have a funny scene in it where a murderer ends up in heaven and his coworker is in hell, and they meet up and they talk, and he's like, how the fuck did you, a murderer, get into heaven? And the guy's like, oh,
I just can't wrap my head around like a Jew being in the same place as Hitler that was killed by his ideology.
Well, a lot of the things on Earth cease to matter in the afterlife. But I just, you know, I'm not even going to try to get into this on the internet. I just recommend reading The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which I know recommending a book to explain your arguments isn't always the best idea on a live stream, but we can move on to the next one. I don't think someone having bad ideas or ideas you disagree with certainly deserves hell for eternity. I think that's more of a hell-inducing act than, you know, actually, the more I think about it, wanting someone to go to hell for eternity is a far worse thing than having bad ideas. Fuck. Sorry, keep going.
Okay, well, I still believe it, but we can just disagree on that. The second thing I wanted to say is, and this is completely unrelated, but I just wanted to note this because I did a stupid amount of research into Dugin's fucking philosophy, is that it's weird to hear his daughter talk about Italian fascism when her father was so heavily influenced by Italian reactionaries when it came to the conservative revolution, specifically like Julius Evola and like the idea of the conservative revolution, right? He was like so inspired by him, he even like translated his works because he wanted more people in Russia to like read it. So it's really weird hearing his daughter like split so much from her father when it comes to like Italian reactionaries.
Dugin doesn't like fascists either, right?
It depends on the fascist.
Burns
Like
is
I
a
think like it depends on
morally
who.
corrupt,
I think it depends on if
bankrupt
it's
man.
like strategic means and like, for example, like I think like when it comes for strategic reasons, he will ally with any fascist in the world. Like absolutely.
I
Like
think
he
that
wrote about this in the foundations of geopolitics about this idea of creating geopolitical chaos. Let me actually get the quote. I actually had it pulled up
yeah.
because it was super
Did
interesting.
did you read the fourth political theory?
I have not. I've downloaded it. It's almost 300 pages. I want to read it now
Yeah,
for
I'd
my own
recommend it.
interest.
Because he, when he talks about the fourth political theory, the first three are, communism, fascism, liberalism,
Yeah.
and every one of them he offers a stringent critique of, saying they are failed ideologies and we need not
He wants to
revive
take
them.
the good parts of all of them and create like the
Yes.
mega new
The
Chad
fourth political,
fascist
yeah.
liberal communist thing, whatever it is. I mean, he was
Yeah,
a
but
national.
he does not
He
like-
was
he does not
one of the
like
founding
fascists.
members of the National Bolshevik Party. I mean, if you look at their symbol, I mean, it's
I don't care
certainly
about their
something.
symbol. I care about what their arguments are and what they're actually saying. I'm really fucking tired of people on the internet
Well,
saying,
we
"Oh,
could talk
look
about
at
what
the
they thought
Turning
about
Point
homosexuals.
USA
I mean,
stage.
if you
Looks like
wanna
it
really
could
get
be a
into it.
swastika." Like I don't really care what symbol or out of context quote can be pulled together to make someone appear the way you want them to appear.
Do you think the National Bolsheviks didn't have any like authoritarian leanings? I mean, he's a neo-Eurasianist. Being an authoritarian is kind of like just part of the territory.
Yeah, I think he has authoritarian leanings. I don't think he's a fascist, though. I think he doesn't like fascism.
Do you think he works with racists?
Probably. I don't know.
Okay, well, let me read you this quote. This is from
I
page
think
300.
a lot of people work with racists. I think most people on this planet
but working
are
for
racist or
racists
just
to start a
lying
race
about it.
war is not a good thing. Would you agree with me on that?
Of course.
Okay, well, in page 367 of the West thread of the foundations of geopolitics, it is generally important, and this is his like strategy to counter the United States, to introduce geopolitical chaos within American daily experience by encouraging all manner of separatism, ethnic diversity, social and racial conflict, and actively supporting every extremist dissident movement, racist sectarian groups, and destabilizing the political processes within America. This is why you would see him with people like, David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. This is why you would see him.
Which page is this on?
367. This is the chapter, The West's Threat. So personally, I would like to not have to shoot my neighbor in a race war. I think that would be bad. And so I don't like this part of Alexander Dugin all that much. I think it's very bad. And it's also, I think, why he has so many allies in the international, not only in the international media, but in the international political extremes, right? This is why he meets with people, in my opinion. Now,
Do you have the PDF that you could send me?
You mean like the PDF of the book?
Yeah. I just would like to read that in context.
I don't have the PDF of the book, but I can get you the PDF of the book after the conversation. Like, I just don't have the book
I'd have
on
to
hand.
read it because holy shit, do people misinterpret books bad?
Can you
sections of it?
Can you like? It is important to introduce geopolitical chaos within the American daily experience by encouraging all manner of separatism, ethnic diversity, social and racial conflict, actively supporting every extremist dissident movement, racist sectarian groups, and destabilizing political processes within America. He then,
I don't
like,
know.
how can that be a misquote? Like, is he like quoting somebody else in this, or like I just?
Book. You can't. I could take one section out of almost any book in the world and make everyone look like a psychopath.
He is calling this an important thing to do in this quote.
Is he? Or is there a bunch of context that's missing?
It is generally important, is how he opens the sentence.
I have seen 1,000
Okay, I can read you the next. I can read you the next part of it. This is the next part of it. I can read you the next sentence. I can read you the next sentence.
Tweet me the PDF.
While simultaneously supporting isolationist tendencies in American politics, those circles, often right-wing Republicans, believe the USA should confine itself to its own internal problems. The position Russia has placed itself is supremely favorable. This is his chapter on how to deal with the West. It's the West threat. Like, the whole book, the foundations of geopolitics, is a fucking mindfuck. It's insane. It's the ramblings of a madman. He advocates the annexation of Finland, of Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Moldova, Belarus. Like, there's so much. He advocates like making a Moscow, Berlin, and Tokyo axis in this book. The book's insane. Like, it's like maybe he's now. If you want to say he's changed since the creation of this book, and those meetings with David Duke and these other people were just like a flutter of the eyes or something, flutter of the brain, and he's changed since then. I'm open to hear how he's changed. But like when he wrote this book, like this shit's insane. 1997.
Sure. Yeah, let's say okay. I'll good faith. I'll just take your word for it.
I took your word.
I hope you can understand. I hope you can understand why I'm extremely skeptical when, like I said, my whole Twitter feed has been filled with misquotes and misattributed quotes, all of this nonsense, mistranslations. So I will have to go check it out, read it myself, but take it in good faith. Let's say Dugin did say. In fact, let's say all of the worst things everyone said about Dugin is true. This doesn't change my mind on how people are treating his daughter's death, and the fact that I think most of these people dancing on her grave would be pro-Russia sycophants in a second if Russia were winning the propaganda war publicly, because they're not actually thinking. They're advocating the murder of people based on a social trend on Twitter and what's popular right now, and I think it's disgusting behavior.
Can I bring up the most nuclear take of them all? The take no one would dare to ever bite. Okay, I think he is a cuck for his daughter's death.
What does that mean?
What I mean by that is that he is too smart to know that it wasn't the Ukrainians who did this. There's no substantial evidence pointing this to be the Ukrainians. I mean, the whole story is ludicrous. In 48 hours, the FSB was able to find out that an Azov regiment spy, which is not even what the Azov regiment did, took her daughter, went into Russia, went all the way to Moscow for months, then followed Darya Dugin, planted the bomb, again, take your daughter to work day on the assassination front, then drove all the way to Estonia. But don't worry, she left multiple identifying characteristics like an Azov battalion ID in her apartment, would just so happen to be photoshopped. And it all came out in 48 hours. At the same time, this organization, the National Republican Army, is coming forward saying they claimed it. They don't even look into it. It's too smart to not look at that and immediately just take the FSB line on it.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that he is using his daughter to forward the war. Absolutely. He went on the funeral. I don't know if you've watched the funeral. Did you watch the funeral? I watched it.
I've seen clips from it, so I'm not going to.
During this, he talks about, and he released a statement about, like, we need to, like, the main thing we can do to honor her legacy is victory. And he talks about, like, the whole thing is it's almost like an acid trip watching him, like, speak about how, like, I think, like, my daughter's first word was Russia when she was a girl. It was, like, the wildest speech during her funeral. And I think he's straight up just turned his daughter into a propaganda piece, knowing that there's a decent chance it wasn't even the Ukrainians that did this, but blamed them anyway because it suits his own political foundations. Because that's the type of man he is.
Sure. What does this have to do with my criticism of people's reactions on Twitter that are also using her death for their own political ends?
Because I would say if the idea is the bad idea is, like, all these people are using her death for political means, either through Schadenfreude.
It's worse. It's not even political means. It's just for an act of self-masturbation to look good on Twitter.
So I would say that he's even worse than all of that. He's treated his daughter worse than every single one of those Twitter people by using her to go kill more Ukrainians.
I mean, you can think that, but sure, like, that still doesn't change the fact.
So then why should I care about respecting Alexander Dugin or his daughter when he won't even do it? When her own father is willing to drag out her corpse and drag it through the street in order to go kill more Ukrainians.
I guess we'll just eternally go on saying, why should I care? Why should I treat people like human beings? Why should I take a moment and realize that, you know, the political assassination of a non-combatant is bad and we probably shouldn't celebrate it because they did something effing bad,
I never endorsed the assassination.
This is going to be.
I'm just not endorsing respect
why should I care?
Of these people.
You're asking
I
why
don't
should I
endorse
care
respect.
about people's. You're asking why should I care about people's reactions, and I'm saying because it's this reaction right now that causes this cycle that leads to wars.
I don't think. Well, to be clear, I've already said there's certain things I don't endorse. I don't endorse calls for, like, going and assassinating random Russian politician or this or that. I'm specifically just endorsing the Schadenfreude. I've said, or not even endorsement, just maybe almost an indifference to it, you know? Like, it's
But
like,
if the
this is just
Schadenfreude
a
is
reality of the
based on
situation.
lies and propaganda, then you are implicitly saying you are okay with large groups of people celebrating and calling for the death of other individuals based on
I just said
misinformation,
the
which
exact opposite of that.
okay. Well, you're saying you're okay with the Schadenfreude. So you're okay with
Yeah.
people celebrating and being happy about someone's death based on lack of information and misinformation, which is what's going on
What
Twitter
did
right
I
now.
didn't
And that
say,
is,
I
but that's
specifically
what's
said,
happening.
I named the things. I named her covering up of war crimes and her assisting in the
But that's not
dehumanization of
what
the Ukrainian
people,
population and her support of the war. These are the three things. These are the
but
things
that's
I'm
not why
basing this
people are
off of.
celebrating.
I'm not
So
saying that if somebody said that she was the reason that like all these shows got taken off of the HBO Max website streaming service, like if that's the reason somebody thinks that like she should have been assassinated or that you're celebrating her death, obviously I don't agree with that, because I think spreading disinformation is bad, right? It's a bad thing. But if somebody understands who Dugina was and takes some sort of like almost I mean purely like human, like I can't, you did this to me and so kind of screw you, like I am indifferent or somewhat even like smile upon it. Like, it's, I just think that's part of the human experience.
okay. What I would say to anyone who feels this way, who feels that, the kind of Twitter hordes, I'm talking beyond the individuals that have actually experienced these things, the Twitter hordes that are kind of saying rest in piss, like you've said, I hope she goes to
No,
hell,
I
all
just
these
want to go to
things.
hell, not piss. That would be unsanitary.
Okay, well, for the people that kind of support this reaction, I just want them all to know if the propaganda war ever goes the way of Russia, every single one of these motherfuckers is going to be cheering on your death in Ukraine. All of them. Because these people are not informed. They don't know what they're talking about. They're cheering on her death thinking I'm her because they actually don't even know who this person is. Because all they are people that are operating off of hate and bloodlust. And that bloodlust is entirely for their own self masturbation and popularity of wanting to seem like a good person or the good guy that's winning this war against the horrible fascists. But once again, if the Russian media were winning the propaganda war and saying that they were the ones fighting the fascists, these exact same people would be treating you with the exact same dehumanizing language, not for a second considering what is true about you, what is being said about you, whether it's real, any of that.
So
And, if you want to support that kind of behavior in the world, we're going to see this cycle continue over and over again, and that's on you.
there's two things. First thing, I just spread misinformation. I've just been informed that piss is actually super sanitary, and but still it's gross, so I'm still against it. Second thing is, I mean, yes, if Russia was able to produce better propaganda and able to trick people and lie to people better, then there would probably be more people wishing for my death. People wish for my death all the
Not
time
more
anyway.
people. It would be the exact same
People
people. It
actively
would be
talk
the
about like,
exact same people
Dylan, I sent
cheering
your
on
coordinates
Darya's
to the
death.
Russian military like all the time, right? And like, hey, I don't think they actually did it, or if they did, I don't think the Russians are going to do anything with it, right? But also, I do think these death threats might have a little bit more maybe moral weight on my mind than if I was in, back in Maryland in my home state, since I am technically in a war zone, and I've at least gotten up to 1 mile from Russian positions before, right? Within the range of artillery, drones, and stuff like that, even been spotted by drones. But yeah, of course, if they bought Russian propaganda, then maybe they would be wishing for my death. If they were
Well, they would.
fed misinformation,
They would.
maybe
If
some
that's
of
what
them
were
would be pushing
popular,
for my
they
death,
would
and
buy
I'd be
it.
against that. But but my statement isn't, hey, just hate her for whatever reason, right? I think people should have a proper reason to hate somebody if they do hate somebody, or a proper reason to engage in this type of like, that person, that terrible person is gone, or something like that. If they really want to, I think they should have a proper reason. Of course, I'm not endorsing anybody going around and saying the reason they hate her is because she like ruined the finale of Better Call Saul or whatever it is. Like, that would be this disinformation. I would want people to not like her for the reasons that she was a bad person, like the denial of war crimes. I mean, you're not going to get me to defend not liking her for the wrong reasons. Of course not.
I mean, I think that all these people don't like her for the
You're
wrong
saying
reasons.
all
I
these
think they don't.
people. You're painting with
Yeah,
like very
all the people. I
broad
mean,
brushes here.
sure. I mean, there's one thing where you can like pull one or two tweets off the internet and claim it's a whole group, but if anyone wants to know what I'm talking about. You
Well,
can go to
Lauren,
my tweet
what
that I
tweets are you
said.
gonna like
You can
notice
go.
more? Are you gonna notice the tweets
No,
where
no, no,
someone's
no,
like,
no, no,
ah,
no,
I
no.
didn't
It's
like her, I don't care that much? Or are you
Dylan,
gonna
I'm not
notice the tweet
joking.
that's gonna go like that's gonna be schizo posting? We always notice the
No, no, no,
schizo
Dylan, I'm not
posters.
joking. I had 1 million engagements or sorry, impressions on that tweet, and the majority of the responses are pro her death. And I like it's been a solid flood of death threats all week. It's not like 1 or 2 tweets here and there. And I'd go encourage people, go to my timeline, look for the tweet where I'm calling out people for celebrating her death. I'll retweet it again right now and look at the quote tweets. That's all you have to do. And you let me know if you think that this is
Can
a
I ask
human
you?
behavior that is going to lead to a better world
Let me
politically.
well, I do think. Well, that's a separate question, but let me ask you a question. Why did you
No,
tweet
it's an
out?
important one.
Well, no, I was gonna ask a
That's
completely
the one
separate
we're
question.
talking about entirely, but
I was
yeah,
gonna ask you a
go
separate
ahead.
question, but why did you tweet about that and not about the terrible things she did in her life?
Why did I tweet about that
Why did
and
you
not
just
the
tweet about
terrible
being
things?
angry at all the people celebrating
Because I
her
didn't
death and
want to
not
be like the
necessarily like
girl
her
that
horrible
tweeted out,
actions?
"Hey," I didn't want to be like the person who tweeted out, "Hey, I heard Kobe Bryant had a sexual assault
Do you think
allegation
this is a little
against
different
him
than
right
Kobe
when
Bryant,
right
considering this
when
is an
he
act of
died."
war?
No, and plus, you already have thousands of accounts on Twitter, not just condemning her and saying she's a bad person for things she didn't do,
Uh-huh.
but just full on mocking and celebrating her death. So yeah, I'm not going to add to the already fanned flame that's an absolute disaster of hatred. I'm going to try to calm down that hatred. That was the necessary thing to add to the conversation at that point. If
Calm down
all
the
of Twitter
hatred.
were sitting there, posting lies the other way around, I'd probably, and this is actually what I say in a video I'm uploading right after this, a lot of people think that because I am sitting here and rejecting misinformation about Russians, that I am inherently anti-Ukraine or whatever. That is not true. That is not the case. If it were the case that the mainstream media, were constantly publishing misinformation about Ukraine because they were all pro-Russia, you bet your bottom dollar I'd be sitting there debunking that, and everyone would be saying I was a Ukrainian shill, right? The problem is I sit here and I try to debunk the popular narrative that too often spreads misinformation. And right now, that popular narrative is pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia. So the majority of the misinformation you're going to see is going to be against Russia. It's going to be, the Ghost of Kiev stuff, right? It's going to be the Snake Island massacre stuff. It's not going to be all of this stuff that's making Russia look good. But once again, bet your bottom dollar if it were the other way around, I'd be happy to sit there debunking stuff against Ukraine.
The Russian government works very, very hard to spread misinformation. Whether it was its lies about Bucha, whether it was its lies about any other number of atrocities
these aren't things that are believed by the Western
the person
media.
we're talking about in question here is somebody who helped with the spreading of that misinformation. I mean, she is just one example of many, many other influencers within the Russian state who has worked to put this misinformation not only to the Russian-speaking world, but to the English-speaking world as well. Eurasia, the Eurasianism website that she wrote for her father's website, has English translations that does get linked online.
Would you say it is the popular? Do you think it's the popular narrative?
Do I think it's the popular narrative? No, because I don't think it's the popular narrative.
It's not.
But I think it does deserve.
And pretending like you're doing some sort of like significant act by throwing, one more piece of hay in the giant pile of hay of all these people saying, "Oh my gosh, Russia bad, Russia bad."
Well,
like no, everyone thinks that. Everyone already has this
different
freaking opinion.
Sets of influences, though. Like, you have your own audience, right, who believe their own things, have their own political persuasions, and I'm sure a certain amount of member of people in your audience respect you a decent amount, Lauren, for whatever reason that may be. They might agree with you, they might like what you've done in your past, or whatever. And if they respect you, then they might take your words into consideration on this issue. And instead of taking them and saying, hey, this is the bad thing she's done in her life, yada, 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 you took the time to instead be like, hey, we need to cool it on this chick.
Yeah, I do think we do. And
do you think that's more important than making sure people remember her legacy for what she really was?
Because I think
when the Russian government, well, let me finish why I think it's
far more dangerous than
the Russian government is actively trying to make her into a martyr, where her name is being written on tanks, and her father is dragging out her corpse to advocate for the war to continue, which will then just create more corpses. I think it's much more pressing to make sure that people remember exactly who she was.
That she deserved to die? That a civilian non-combatant
not that she deserved to
be killed in a
die,
car bomb?
but
Then
that
what the
she
fuck
is
are you
not a
suggesting,
saint.
Dylan?
She is certainly not a martyr, and the Ukrainians probably didn't even do it like the Russian government is alleging.
Don't you think it's probably more important to tell people that assassinating individuals is wrong? Because
when they're using her to go kill more Ukrainians, I think it is important to do. Boss, you can do both. You could do both.
I'm not seeing people do both. I'm seeing you saying you don't give a shit that she was killed, and I'm seeing all your friends saying they hope more of it happens.
To be honest, I don't really care if she was killed,
yeah,
but I don't endorse the assassination.
So if you're going to sit here and pretend that I have some moral duty to tell people, here's all the bad things she did in a list, even though everyone on Twitter is already telling you stuff, plus exaggerating and lying about her. I'm saying
it's an okay thing to do.
You don't have a moral duty to tell people that political assassinations are wrong and maybe, you know, hold your audience back when they're encouraging more and more and more and killing fascists in the streets like dogs, you know? I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, I think you're grandstanding about it a little bit now, right? I didn't say it was your moral duty. I asked you why you didn't do it.
You're acting like it.
Well, I do think it's a good thing to do, right? I do think it would be it's a good thing to make sure martyrs aren't created that'll be used to just create more death. Right? Which is exactly what's going to happen in Ukraine, as we saw with the bombing of that train recently. Definitely when we were getting reports that, hey, I was in Kiev for the last 48 hours. Those sirens were going off like fucking crazy. And it was expected in response to this. So I do think it's important to make sure that this person isn't created into a martyr, that people remember the disgusting person she was, and make sure that we don't allow them to lie about who did this, and allow her father to use her as, what did he call her? A maiden at the altar. I forget, man. It was his funeral speech was insane.
Well, you know, none of that would have happened if perhaps more people knew that assassinating non-combatants were wrong. Perhaps that's an important thing we should be talking about.
Who do you think did it?
I don't know. Doesn't matter. What matters to me is how people are reacting and talking, because that's what I do know.
You don't think it matters at all who did this? Because if it was the Russian government who did this, wouldn't that be pretty interesting?
I'm not going to sit here and come up with conspiracies until we know more.
I'm not really coming up with a conspiracy. I'm just asking. Like,
I don't know. I'm just
asking questions, Laura.
I'm not going to pretend. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend I know. Like, I don't.
Okay.
All right. I do have to wrap this up, but were there any final thoughts that you wanted to go over?
What do you think about his geopolitical theory of the neo-Eurasianist state, like Alexander Dugin? I know this is unrelated, it's a separate question, but I did like an asinine amount of research into this, and I'm never going to be able to use this information ever again because nobody in America is a neo-Eurasianist.
Well, I mean, I think it would be worth. I don't know if you could get him to talk to you, but Michael Millerman, he's an expert on Dugin and Eurasianism.
Mm-hmm.
No. Michael Millerman, he is the guy who translated Dugin's. You're probably reading his books, actually. He's the guy who translated Dugin's works into
he had the foreword in
English.
There, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's a really thoughtful individual. I think he would probably tell you and tell people that Dugin is one of the most misunderstood philosophers in modern times, and his work. Not to say, and Millerman is a very. When he talks about it, he's completely impartial. He's not saying this like, I am a big supporter of Eurasianism. He's just like completely objective. This is how these groups feel. This is how that groups feel. I did an interview with him on why he believes Russia invaded Ukraine and what he thinks that the motivations were ideologically. And he does a really good job of explaining it from an objective perspective. And he's the one that I had help translate some of these quotes and explain the context to them.
Did you read the Foundations for... Oh, okay. That's fantastic.
I did. I read the
Foundations of Geopolitics?
No, I think I told you I hadn't read it, and I need to go see the context of that quote you were saying.
Okay.
But yeah, I
do recommend reading it. It's quite something. And did you know that they actually teach? I believe it's on the reading list of the Russian Military Academy. Actually.
Interesting. That is interesting.
It is interesting that this schizophrenia can influence the Russian military in any way.
I'll have to check out the book, but Dugin is a bit of a he's out there for sure. There's no denying that. But yeah, I guess ultimately...
I mean, you met him, right?
I did, yeah.
What was the context of that?
I was curious to interview him because I think I'd read the Fourth Political Theory and thought he had some fascinating observations about humanity and life. You can go watch my interviews with him. They're actually really, he has some really interesting ideas. Whether you think his wider perspectives are horrible or awful or whatever, I mean, he's a philosopher. He spent a lot of time working out his visions of the world, and even if you don't agree with them, they can make for interesting food for thought.
Okay. Got you. So you didn't ask him anything about his geopolitics then?
I think we talked about it briefly. I asked him about his opinions on Trump. I asked him about his opinions on America, the future of America, the millennial generation,
What was
life,
his
death. We
thoughts on
talked about
Trump?
literally everything. Oh, I can't remember exactly. I feel, ugh.
Hmm.
I feel like he thought of him as a bit comical, and I asked him about the alt-right as well, and he kind of saw these as more shallow, comical versions of what the West could be, and he kind of sees people as needing more of a spiritual revival than any sort of political revival. And that's also an interesting thing about both Ukraine and Russia and the war going on. There is obviously in the West, we don't really talk about the spiritual that much, certainly not in a political or a war
He's much of a
sense.
mysticist, isn't he? His daughter was
Yeah,
too.
he's a mysticist. Yeah. They
Did
really
you
believe this is all like a spiritual war.
his daughter when she was in Azovstal, you know, I keep saying Darya, and I know that's her name, but I keep thinking of the cartoon. When she was in Azovstal, she actually said she felt like Satanism and black energy in the air. It's very
Yeah,
interesting
they're
how that
very
mysticism is transferred to her from her father.
well, and they believe that kind of the future of mankind. This is something that like I think people need to understand about the Russian perspective. Like, how could someone go and invade a country unprovoked, right? So this is why I think people like Millerman are so important in translating some of the Russian perspective. Like someone like Dugin literally thinks the state of humanity is on the line, like the state of what humans are today. He thinks that we're headed towards transhumanism where people are going to slowly lose their humanity. They're going to try to use medical systems to live forever. We're trying to, there are these things that are natural orders that he sees, like women and men. And now we're trying to become gods and say that we can change our genders. Now we're trying to become
Doesn't that
gods and
sound
say
kind of
we can
cool
live
though?
longer than we can. Right, right. A lot of Westerners would be like, yeah, I want to be cyborg. I want to be this. But what Dugan sees is
Cyberpunk
this
was pretty cool
terror.
though.
You know those memes where you see where it's like, has science gone too far or man-made
Hmm.
horrors beyond my comprehension? Or like the Ted Kaczynski stuff where he's like, technology has been a disaster for the human race. Like that's what Dugan sees us going towards. And he thinks we're going to lose the soul of mankind and our total link to the spiritual realm and what actually makes us human if we keep going down this direction. So
Isn't
like,
it strange to hear from a man who supports such a brutal invasion about the need to preserve the human soul?
sure, right. It is, but like that's like the level of their ideology is they're like the last battle for humanity or like what the Russian identity is going to be, something separate from the liberal world order may take bloodshed. And
Eurasianism,
he's
yeah.
absolutely a radical, like there's no denying that, right? But that's his, like his perspective and his daughter's perspective that they believe this battle against the liberal transhumanist all of this
Did
world order
did you know
is
what his views about Moscow being like Russia being the successor to Rome?
no, is that in the book you read by him?
Yeah, he believes that Russia can be the successor for Rome for the Orthodox peoples. Like he wants to unite like Serbia and like all these other Orthodox peoples and make Russia like the third Rome, the official successor to the Roman
Right.
Empire.
Well, I think how I had it explained to me is with the expanding power of the West, like it's either a dominate or be dominated in his mind. So it's like if Russia doesn't start making moves to be more aggressive, then they're just going to slowly be sucked into the liberal world order conglomerate, which is why they,
Based.
definitely fear why they definitely fear the like NATO expansion into their area. It's like slowly our identity will just disappear unless we're aggressive. So that's like the what I've had explained to me. I know someone who's more of an expert on this topic would probably be watching us kind of mortified by how horribly we're piecing together the ideology, but from my limited understanding, that's what I have heard and
Well,
had articulated to me.
I don't want to keep you any longer, so I'll let you go. And I just wanted to have an opportunity to use all this readings that I'll never be able to use again. I
Yeah,
hope you
well,
have
you're
a good
welcome.
weekend.
Yeah, you too, and good for you for being on the ground there. Regardless of our many disagreements, I respect that in anyone, left, right, doesn't matter. Living by your actual politics and seeing it for yourself, I respect that. So good for you, man.
Thank you. You have a good one.
Cheers. All right.
Well, that's that. That is that. That is that. How was that, boys? How was that? God, I'll never be able to use that Dugan information again. Really, ever. Base, painful. Good chat, creepy, painful. Wild, revolting. She's so slippery. It was a little slippery. I think I did okay. I think I did okay. I need to double check that quote because I did send it to Russian speakers and they told me it was accurate. So I'll just have to double check it. I don't know. It felt like I was in a weird position because it felt like I had to like defend what other people on Twitter had done when I more wanted to defend just the how you say, I just wanted to defend the idea of somebody taking joy in the death of somebody bad. And I don't think that makes us you the worst person ever. And I don't think that's never morally justifiable or makes you fucking like, oh my God, just as bad as them or something. Like I that is what I wanted to defend. And it felt like I became Twitter in that debate. You know? Yeah, exactly. Omnibub. You became Twitter. And like I had to represent all of Twitter and any death threat she ever received, which like I can't represent all of Twitter. I can't represent every single death threat ever. Like I just can't do that. Obviously, I'm not going to defend everything that anybody on Twitter says. There's so many people on Twitter, for God's sakes. You now know how Destiny feels? Does Destiny have to represent all of Twitter often? She's so emotional about this for some reason, as if she projected herself on the piece of Darya Dugina. I don't know if she was emotional about it. She was very assertive. She was definitely got her speaking time. I like for the first like 10 minutes of it, I was trying to be generally somewhat passive. I was like, okay, I got to switch gears.